Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Walensky, it was about a month ago in an appropriations hearing, I asked Dr. Fauci about lockdowns, and it was based upon the Johns Hopkins study that said that tactic basically was neutral on mortality. And I don't think it got into maybe what mortality might have been caused due to the fact that we were locked down in other areas. But would you agree with Dr. Fauci on that we probably won't ever need to use lockdowns again on COVID as we currently know it?
I certainly hope not, Senator Braun. I know that Hopkins study had some flaws and that there have been other studies that have refuted that. We'd be happy to get you more details on that. But certainly we're doing everything in our power to prevent that from happening. But COVID has sent us numerous curveballs, so I will never say never.
I might also add that in everything I observed in keeping in touch with the business community, who took it pretty seriously, they did not think that transmission was occurring at work. It was mostly elsewhere, and that locking those businesses down, of course, I think we're dealing with those consequences currently. Another question, when it comes to vaccine mandates, Supreme Court finally weighed in and said that did not make sense when we were going to try to force businesses down to 100 employees to either have their employees get a vaccine or lose their job. That seemed like the ultimate heavy hand of government. Would you ever recommend doing that again? Because the administration seemed to err on the side of vaccine mandates and lockdowns, which I talked about earlier.
So vaccine mandates are generally a local decision. And what I will say is we at CDC are for promoting more people to get vaccinated because those who are vaccinated and boosted have decreased risk of severe disease and death. So generally we would support getting more people vaccinated.
Well, I'd like to cite the fact that the administration has forced it through all federal employees. And I believe that initiation of what would have been the biggest mandate for getting vaccinated, came from the Biden administration. So through an executive order, I agree with you that local prerogative should come into play, but this was not that. You care to comment further on that?
CDC stand is the more people who are vaccinated and boosted, the decreased risk of severe outcomes and deaths.
So we've now gone a couple years. We've learned a lot. And I think the data has shown that this has ravaged in a disproportionate way the elderly with comorbidities. And I'd like your kind of assessment going forward, if we're with the general dynamic of what we know about COVID. Does it make sense that we protect better where the data has shown that we've had the most issues with? And also parallel this to the flu. I know it's more transmissible, but the flu generally has a broader fatality rate. And here, Senator Paul talked about it a little earlier, we know that it has really hit one category very hard. And do you think we're protecting them well enough? And do you think it makes sense to take the broad approaches for so much of the country that was either asymptomatic or had mild symptoms?
I think we need to do both. Certainly our elder community has been among those that have been highest risk of severe disease and death. But I will also say that COVID is one of the top leading killers of children right now. Deaths among children during the COVID pandemic have been higher than we generally see from COVID, have been higher than we've seen for flu. So I actually think we need to protect young children as well as protect everyone with a vaccine, and especially protect elders. I will say that we have recently endorsed and recommended boosters for all those over the age of 50, a second booster for all those over the age of 50, and we will have forthcoming data later this week that'll demonstrate, compared to a third booster, that those over the age of 50 who've gotten a fourth have a 7-fold decreased risk of death. So we are actually doing both of those simultaneously, and that's what I think we need to be doing.
Thank you. And finally, for Dr. Fauci, of course, we read this week, after 675 years, we finally have found the origins of the Black Plague. Care to give us an update on where we're at on tracking down the origins of COVID-19?
Thank you for that question, Senator. There have been a number of papers that have come out from highly qualified virologists and viral phylogeneticists that indicate that this is very, very likely a jumping species from an animal host, perhaps through an intermediate host, into a human species, which then spread throughout the human population, certainly and almost certainly originating in China, in Wuhan. We still open up and keep always an open mind as to whether or not this had to do with a virus that was isolated out in the environment and that came into a lab and then had what most people refer to as a lab leak. I believe that is less likely that that's the case, but I also believe we need to keep an open mind and have all possibilities be investigated. But the evidence from the virology community points strongly towards a natural occurrence.
Very quickly, do you think the Chinese will cooperate with you to try to get to the thorough bottom of it?
Senator, I certainly hope so, because we're not going to get an answer that's a definitive answer. I mean, even if they do cooperate, we may not do that. But certainly, for example, if we want to continue surveillance among bat populations and other wild animals that might serve as an intermediary host, as well as understanding what was going on in some of their laboratories, I believe it's essential to have cooperation and collaboration with the Chinese.
Thank you.